You would think, considering what appears to be my undying love for the Adidas Nemeziz 19.1, that I wouldn't want to change it in any way, shape or form. That's not quite true. Today, we're going to look at something that might just make the Nemeziz perfect. What's up guys, James here from BootWizard Boot Reviews, and yes, today we are making a video on the Adidas Nemeziz 19.1, which makes me very happy. What we're going to do is we're going to look at what we've got, some of the criticisms of it, and how I would fix those problems. Or in actual fact, and more pertinently, have Adidas already fixed that problem and we just don't realize it yet? So do remember to like the video, get subscribed to the channel, and drop down in the comments down below right now what you think the biggest change you would make to the Nemeziz is. And making it the X or something like a Vapor is not a valid change. It has to be something you can do to the existing Nemeziz. Let's get on with it. This is the original Adidas Nemeziz 19.1. So this is the second colorway that was released. It was released way back last year with that, what people got to know as the bacon boot, and this was the Messi colorway that was basically released at the same time. Big fan of the boot, and the colorway has grown on me. I do love a white boot. What are the complaints? Well, the first one isn't so much a complaint that I've had at all, but something that has been brought to light recently by the brand new the brand new 0.1. So this is now the Nemeziz 0.1. There's been a minor name change and a minor tweak in the boot. This now has a textured upper. So I do have a whole video on this, and I've even compared it to the Phantom GT just to see which one does have the better grip texturing, but that's a minor update. These are still fundamentally the same boot. On the whole, I really like the upper on this boot. Texture wasn't something I ever really wanted, but it's not a bad thing that we now have it. And I suppose my only complaint was that they're a little stiff out of the box, but they break in just fine. So the upper I keep exactly the same, whether you want to go for 0.1 or 19.1, I don't really mind either way. No changes here. So it's not the upper, it's not the fit either. The last on this is actually very similar to the X 19.1, which is a last that will fit most people and is genuinely very comfortable. I think the lockdown's excellent in the boot. I think the responsiveness is excellent in the boot, and I think that that is better than you got from the X 19.1, which is the speed boot that was around from Adidas at the time this dropped. There's less comparisons to make to the Ghosted. Maybe I'll do a video on it at some time. If you want that, hit the like button, comment down below, and of course get subscribed. So if there's none of those things, what's the problem? Well, it's the sole plate in some respects. So we'll go back to the sole plate. Here we have a split sole design from Adidas on the Nemeziz. This being the 0.1, the 19.1 is identical. And one of the biggest problems that you get with this particular sole plate isn't necessarily the traction, that's fine. It's that it's actually quite heavy. Nearly all the weight of this boot sits in the sole plate. Now you could argue that's the case with many boots, but because of the way that this is constructed, the super thin upper, the super barefoot touch, it just makes the boot feel that little bit unbalanced. Basically, it feels bottom heavy, so I definitely want to take some weight off here. Next up is a complaint that I have heard and I completely think is justified. Not a huge problem for me as I quite like it, but the boot, the sole plate is very stiff. Through the heel and midfoot, okay, it adds to the responsiveness, the stability of the boot, but it is pretty damn rigid, and even the flex in the forefoot isn't that fantastic, and it doesn't really correspond to a hugely impressive spring back, which you might expect from having that stiffer sole plate. It's not a huge issue for me because I like the feeling and I don't mind a stiffer sole plate, but I can absolutely see the complaint and the problem here. And when you build that into the fact that this is Adidas's agility boot, which is in some terms another word for speed, like a second-rate speed boot, but they really should try and set this apart from any other Adidas boot and not have it as a speed boot, make it an agility boot, and you probably want a little bit more flexibility in that forefoot or in the sole plate as a whole, especially when you consider that the studs themselves are designed around giving you good rotational movement and being able to push off in multiple directions with the conical and oval shaped studs, which again, I don't dislike, and they give you reasonably decent traction. So if that's the problem, what's the solution, and why do I think Adidas might have already stumbled across it? Or why did I think that Adidas might have already stumbled across it? Well, it's right behind me, folks. This is the reason that Adidas might have accidentally solved their own problem. So this is a Nemeziz 19.1, but it's on the AG sole plate, and not any AG sole plate. Adidas have two. They have recently updated their AG sole plates to something that is a lot more akin to what you're likely to find from a Nike AG Pro. Less of this, which is more akin to a Nike AG R plate. So this is a much more forgiving sole plate for AG surfaces. Now, if for a second we take away the fact that this is built for AG and it's not super aggressive and the studs are fairly short, and we just look at the plate they've used, this is on the speed frame. Let's see if I can get a decent shot there. This is on the speed frame, which is the lightweight plastic outsole that Adidas have been using for a really long time on their X-Line boots. It's known to be very good and it's known to be very lightweight. So if we use that, we take some of the weight out of the bottom of the boot and we balance it out in a much more uniform manner, something that's a lot nicer. And I can vouch for that. This feels like a much more balanced boot. I don't necessarily want the Nemeziz as a whole to be lighter, I just want it to be more balanced. But in terms of weight, let's see if there is an actual difference, because it does feel more balanced. So we'll start with the original, which is that Messi colorway. It's the most used of all the ones I've got, but we should still get a really good indication of where we're going with this. Messi boot on the scales, 219 grams, okay? Pop that one off, and then let's go for the Nemeziz 0.1. Is this a little bit heavier because it has that grip texturing? Now, full disclosure, this is actually a different size to the Messi ones, but we should be close enough. Pop that on there, and we are coming in 217 grams, so it's a little bit lighter, it has the texture, but it's also a smaller size. Anyway, basically no difference. We don't need to worry about the difference between Nemeziz 0.1 and Nemeziz 19.1. Let's move on to the final one, the Nemeziz 19.1 in the old AG version with the sprint frame. Comes in at 189 grams. Now, not only is that significantly lighter than the other two FG models, which are supposed to be FG AG, by the way, it's a lot lighter and it balances the whole boot out in a much better way. So that's a huge plus. One, from a marketing point of view, because everybody seems to want lighter boots. So despite the fact I don't care that it's that bit lighter, the balance is a win for me, and getting the extra weight off is a win for Adidas. So next up, we need to consider, is that switch to an AG plate going to be negative even if we put FG studs on it? Is it going to help that flexibility issue that I was discussing just a minute ago? And I think we have another problem here. It's kind of almost the opposite problem. So let's look at the AG plate again, and I've shown you the FG with how stiff that is and how you don't really get a huge amount of spring back and energy return from the outsole. With the AG, you kind of have a different problem where you see how that bends like all the way down here. There's these strengthening bars that run here. So because it's a very lightweight plastic material, it does need extra strengthening here and there, but they only run to here, and the front of the boot doesn't have sufficient structure. So what that means is that it bends right here. Whereas what you actually want is the boot to bend up here in a toe off area. But because of how these strengthening elements are arranged just here through these studs on the outside, it just means that you get a bend in a very, I don't know, it's a point that I don't want. I want my springiness to kind of come from further up. I don't want the boot to almost bend in half down here. So that's a downside for me. It's also not any more springy, and you don't get any more energy return. If anything, it's worse. So there's no win there. So the speed frame AG plate kind of solves one problem by providing you with the balance, doesn't solve another one because it does mean that the boot is still not particularly springy and it has that bend point that I don't like. And also because obviously we can't go into a magical world and have this in FG. This is very much an AG sole plate with all of the studs, the lower profile. This is only any good for an AG pitch. So if you do play on FG, it's also not an alternative. So it depends on what you're looking for. This is a potential solution if you really want to pick up the Nemeziz, you're playing on AG a lot, and that's your primary surface. I would strongly recommend giving this a go, and you do get it that little bit lighter, which is very, very nice. But finally, I kind of have a pitch to Adidas, and they've got the tools to do this. They've got the technology to do this. They have basically done this before. I will get down on my knees and beg for Adidas to do this, because you would almost be creating my ideal football boot with a small tweak. What I want is I want Adidas to take this boot that I really, really like, this Messi football boot, and I want them to take this boot that I really, really like, this Messi football boot. This is the Pure Agility 16 Plus for anybody that doesn't know. And I want them to combine them. And this isn't anything crazy. Simply what this is taking the outsole from this boot. But it's not even just this boot. This has been Messi's specific outsole. This is the Gambatrax outsole that Messi has had for a really, really long time. He even basically uses a variation of this on the current Nemeziz line in his own custom version. And this also ran on the Nemeziz 17 Messi variations and Nemeziz 18 Messi variations. So when you bought the Nemeziz 17 or 18, if you bought the regular variation, you got one sole plate. If you bought the Messi variation, you got a different sole plate. And that's exactly what I want here. I understand that there's a cost associated with it, and Messi boots really kind of don't sell that incredibly well. So putting brand new, maybe split tooling version of this kind of becomes a cost for Adidas, but I'm living on rainbows in Cloud Cuckoo Land now anyway, and I want this on this. And you may ask why? Why do you want this? And that's because this is one of my favorite outsoles ever. It's modeled on the speed frame or the sprint frame from Adidas, but the stud patterning is different. It doesn't have the external heel counter, and even the strengthening comes along in a slightly different way. So what you get is a very stiff and stable midfoot and heel, but it does have a little bit of flex and give in it, which for an agility boot is exactly what you want. It's not overly stiff, solving the problem that you get from the other variation. Then through the forefoot, nice and flexible, good rotational movement, and a decent amount of spring back. And because it is based off that sprint frame, or speed frame as Adidas renamed it, that means that it's also light, and it would address the balance or weight balance issue that the Nemeziz has by putting this on it. So not only would you get a sole plate that is a lot better, you get the studs, which just give really nice kind of traction in the ground with good multi-directional movement. If the sole plate addresses the balance issue, and it's also that bit more flexible, which I think suits the boot a little bit better overall. So an actual genuine Messi specific variation of the Nemeziz 19.1 would actually be incredible. And yeah, all right, I'm a bit biased because I love the Nemeziz anyway, and I'm literally just trying to put two of my favorite things together, but they're not miles apart. Literally, we're just one generation where Adidas didn't give the Messi specific boot the Messi specific tooling, which I really want. Okay, so I might have got a little hyped and into that in the last kind of 5 minutes there, but let me know what you think. Put down in the comments, would you like to see that? Or pick a sole plate, pick an upper, and tell me which two boots you would push together to make your ideal boot. If you did enjoy this, then do hit the like button. Let me know if you do enjoy this kind of weird concept rant boot type thing, and of course get subscribed to the channel for more of this, more boot reviews. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you soon.